Warm welcome to this lecture series on organizational behavior. This is our third chapter, which is on personality. I'm Dr. MP Ganesh. So this is the outline of the chapter. I'll quickly summarize what happened in the previous lectures. So we defined what is personality. Personality is nothing but relatively stable characteristics of an individual which influences his or her behavior, attitude, motivation and emotion, or the inner qualities which are relatively stable which influence an individual's all the aspects of his or her behavior. So psychology believes personality is the core reason behind individual differences. We also looked at the key assumptions behind this idea of personality in psychology, in which we had a discussion on nature and nurture argument. So what determines personality? Is it nature or is it nurture? So we looked at both the arguments and we came to a conclusion that both play a very important role, both nature and nurture. We also looked at few theories on personality. In fact, we started with intrapsychic theory, more specifically psychoanalytic theory by Sigmund Freud. So according to Sigmund Freud, there are three levels of consciousness, and also personality as a entity has three components according to Freud: id, ego and superego. We also looked at what drives these three aspects of personality. So id is driven by pleasure principle, ego is driven by reality principle, superego is driven by moral principle. We also looked at how a person's behavior is always influenced by a combination of these three, or the conflict or the interaction between these three elements. So there's always continuous interaction between id, ego and superego, and that influences one's behavior. We also looked at how ego tries to balance the demands from id and superego, and sometimes when ego is not able to manage these contradictory demands, it leads to defense mechanisms. We also looked at how personality of an individual develops. We saw how Freud's assumption that there are two major instincts which drive a person, which is eros and thanatos, which is the energy of pleasure. Thanatos is the energy of pain or death. So behavior towards pleasure seeking is driven by eros, and behavior like aggression and self-destruction are driven by thanatos. We also looked at how most of our consciousness is subconscious or unconscious, and how they control our behavior. We also looked at the relevance of Freudian theory in business scenario or organizational scenario. So this is what we saw in the previous lecture. Today we are going to look at a theory called social learning theory. So if you remember the nature-nurture argument, Freudian theory is more of a nature oriented approach, which means we are all born with certain kind of instincts. Even as babies, we are born with certain instincts which are eros and thanatos, death energy and pleasure seeking energy. So those two energies combined together influence the way our personality develops. So that is what is Freudian understanding of personality and how personality develops. So predominantly Freudian theory is about nature as a, or biological factors as a key determinant of personality. On the other hand, social learning theory is more from a nurture point of view. In fact, social learning theory is a extreme extreme level of argument towards social about social factors or influence of social factors. So according to social learning theory, most behavior or almost all behaviors are learnt. So there is nothing like biological, except few behaviors like probably sneezing, blinking your eyes. Other than that, most behaviors are learnt. So what is learning? Learning is when we interact with the environment around us, we get influenced in terms of what is allowed, what is not allowed, what will help, what will not help. So those interactions and the experiences we get from those interactions lead to a permanent change in behavior or relatively permanent change in behavior. So that relatively permanent change in behavior is learning. So I'll explain it in simple words. So let's say a child is born. So according to Freud, the child is, in the previous theory of psychoanalytic theory, the child is born with certain instincts, and it personality develops through the way those instincts interact with the environment, or the way those instincts shape someone's personality. But according to social learning theory, when a child is born, it doesn't know anything. Okay, almost all the behaviors are learned through experience. So what is learning? The child learns what is preferred, what is not preferred, what is good, what is not good, all these things through interacting with the environment. So when it interacts with the environment, if a certain behavior is rewarded, let's say a child is hungry, and when it cries, it gets food. So it knows I should cry, or it learns that I should cry to get food. So it learns that this behavior will help me get a reward. And similarly, when it grows, the same crying behavior may not lead to positive response. So at that particular point of time, the child should behave in a certain way to get a positive response from others, or to get whatever it needs from others. So that particular behavior changes. So it understands that I should not cry, I should ask, or I should behave in a way that people will understand my needs. So a new learning happens. So this is what is learning. At different points in time, we understand what will help us, and that behavior becomes relatively permanent. We exhibit those behaviors whenever we want a certain kind of experience or a certain help from others. So all behaviors are learned, and behaviors can be shaped by positive and negative reinforcements. So what is positive and negative reinforcement? In very simple words, positive reinforcement means reward. So let's say I get good marks in my examination, and my parents are happy, and they buy me something which I asked for. So that is a reward. I know that next time also, if I get good marks, I will get something which I like. So positive reinforcement is something which strengthens a behavior. Reinforcement means something which strengthens behavior. So usually rewards are the ones which strengthen behavior. Negative reinforcement also strengthen behavior. Negative reinforcements are not punishments as such. So people confuse negative reinforcement with punishment. Negative reinforcement means withdrawal of something which somebody likes. For example, if I throw temper tantrum, my mother or my father will not talk to me. Okay? Or if I do something, my parents will dislike me. Okay? So dislike is absence of liking. So negative of a positive thing. Okay? So negative reinforcement also strengthens behavior, because you know that if I do this or if I don't do this, I will not get this. Okay? So through positive and negative reinforcements, a child or a person learns what is the right way of behaving, or what is the right or appropriate behavior. Punishment is causing harm. So even though it sounds like negative reinforcement, it's a different idea. In fact, we have a chapter on learning in which we'll look at those concepts in detail. So a child learns throughout his lifetime. In fact, we don't stop learning till we die. So throughout our life we learn. But the learning which we get in our early age is very important. You know, compared to Freudian theory, social learning theory also agrees childhood experiences are, or childhood is a very important stage in personality development. In Freudian theory, it's about psychosexual development. But in social learning theory, it's about learning through experience in early childhood, and that becomes a strong influencing factor throughout your life. So especially for children, role models play a very important role. So a child looks at or takes someone as a role model, even though the child may not experience all the behavior directly in his or her life, it learns from others' experiences. And through others' experiences, especially the role models' experiences, the child learns what is good and what is bad. For example, many times we would have seen children having, they like certain cinema heroes, or they have their role models. Okay, so they have their action heroes, or all those cinema stars, or even in their personal life maybe they like their teacher. So they have somebody as a role model, somebody to copy or reflect on. So the experiences role model gets, that becomes the influencing factor for the child. For example, in the movie, if the child sees the hero smokes and everybody considers that person as a superhero, then the child will think, okay, smoking will make me feel important, or people will pay attention to me if I smoke. Okay, so in fact that is a very important factor in children learning behaviors like smoking or other undesirable behaviors. In fact, even desirable behaviors can be learned through what happens among his or her role model. So I hope you understood the influence of role models in childhood behavior. So learning theory, according to learning theory, childhood experiences are very important, not because it's a stage they undergo psychosexual development, because it is a stage where they get inspired by role models to a very large extent. And also when we grow, we don't look for rewards or negative reinforcement from external entities. So in early childhood or during adolescent and all, our behavior is controlled by external factors like rewards and punishment and negative reinforcement. But when we grow up, we don't expect external rewards. But what happens is we internalize our rewards. So this is like Freudian understanding of superego. So superego is not necessarily consciousness level according to social learning theory. So it is internalization of external rewards. So for example, when you are a child, you don't want to steal something, because if you steal something or if you grab something from your sibling or your neighbor's child, your parent will scold you. Okay, so when you grow up, it's not like you'll get scolding from someone. You won't do it, you won't steal it even if nobody is watching when you are grown up, because you know that it is bad. You'll feel guilty. So this guilt or feeling a sense of high self-worth are what is called internalized rewards. So when you are a child, you need tangible external rewards and punishment. But when you grow up, you don't need external rewards and punishment. You internalize reward and punishment in the form of guilt or a sense of self-worth. So according to learning theory, aggression is not inborn, aggression is learnt. So according to learning theory, they call it vicarious learning. Vicarious learning means learning through observation or learning through looking at others. Okay, learning through experience. So most of the behaviors, children especially, learn from others. So like I said in the previous slide, role models play a very important role. So if the role models exhibit aggression and they are rewarded, children also learn that it is good or it is okay to be aggressive. In fact, if you see many of the cartoons which are shown in television, they propagate aggression and in a very indirect form. So children think that it is okay to bash somebody's head, or it is okay to push someone, it is okay to bang somebody's head. So which is like a bad thing, isn't it? So they assume that this is a okay behavior, or this is a behavior which is allowed in society. So in fact, there are a lot of research which say that which show relationship between aggression shown in aggressive behavior shown in television and aggressive behavior shown by children. So children who watch many such shows in television become more aggressive later when they grow up. Why? Because they think it is okay to be aggressive, because in television, cartoons and all those things, it is shown that aggression gives you rewards. Okay, so if you see both these two theories, one extreme which is Freudian theory, which strongly believes in instincts. Instincts means inborn quality, not inborn qualities, inborn energy. It is like inborn motive, biological motive, okay, which is instinct. We are born with, so Freudian theory believes we are born with instincts, especially death and life instinct, which drives our behavior, which shapes our personality. That is one extreme, nature argument. Another extreme, which is social learning theory, which says any behavior can be learned through reward and punishment. Most behaviors can be controlled or changed. So there's nothing like, in fact, social learning theory, there's nothing like personality. Anybody can become anything based on what kind of experiences they undergo. So if somebody has undergone a positive experience which rewards extraversion behavior, they'll become extroverts. But later at some point, they go to another context or another situation where extraversion is not rewarded, they will become introverts. So there's nothing like stable quality. It changes depending on what is expected from you in that particular situation and what is rewarded in that particular situation. So the successful human beings are the ones who change their these qualities depending on the environment. So adaptability, when you are very adaptive, you are very successful according to social learning theory. So one extreme is your behavior is controlled by inborn instincts which you cannot change, which you don't have control over. You are a born animal. Instincts means animal nature in a very simple sense. Another extreme is social learning theory, which says you don't have choice. If the society wants or the experiences shapes you, you don't have any choice. There is nothing like good person, bad person. In that particular situation, if the society makes you that way, you become good, or if the society makes you that way, you become bad. So you don't have choice. So both these theories assume that you don't have choice. But one theory says you don't have choice because you are a born animal. Social learning theory says you are an animal, but you are like a circus animal, which means you can be controlled by external factors. If you are like a circus animal, if you are given a reward, a food piece or a meat piece for a lion, you behave or you show behaviors which is expected from you. Okay. So in fact, in social learning theory, we call it shaping of behavior. Any behavior can be shaped. You don't have a choice. So if I want to make you as someone with a certain kind of a quality, I can shape your behavior through rewards and punishment, or reward and negative reinforcement. So both these theories believe that people don't have choice. which is against the whole idea of dignity of human beings. So that is where a new school of thought or a new theory came into existence, which is self theory. So I will not elaborate on self theory in this lecture, we will look at it in the next lecture. But the basic assumption of self theory is, as human beings, we all have free will, which means as an individual you can choose what you want to become. It's true that we are born with certain instincts. It's true that society has a very powerful influence in shaping our behavior. But as individuals, we have choice to either put ourselves in a situation where they shape our behavior the way we wanted to, and also forgo our instincts. You can transcend your instincts and become something better than what you are before. Okay, so I'll stop here. I want you to search this theory called self theory. Use keyword Carl Rogers, CARLROGERS, and self theory. So we'll meet in the next class. Till then, take care. Bye.